Listen, officer, I'll tell you everything I know, okay? That was a real weird night for all of us. On the night of Amy's party, she invited me over. I was excited because Amy and I had gone to high school together, and I had a huge crush on her back then. Amy and I never really talked back in high school, but I knew a lot about her. She was the head cheerleader and real pretty. She was one of the ones that got thrown in the air, and me and my friends tried to get a good look up her skirt. Even now, just being in the same room with her felt like a dream come true. And damn, does she still look good. I had bought a 30-pack of natties for the party, thinking I'd be celebrated as a hero, just to find out that the 12 other guys that had been invited had done the same damn thing. Even worse, Amy was the only girl there. I asked one of the other guys if any ladies were coming, and they said they didn't think so. I tried to bail, but Amy noticed and begged me to stay. And the party was just getting started, so although I was a bit agitated, I stayed just for her. Just that one moment with her made me know that all them other guys didn't have a chance with her compared to me. She gathered us all in the living room and made sure everyone had a drink in their hand. Once everyone had a drink in their hand, she asked for silence and began to talk.
I know this party isn't exactly what any of you had in mind, but I promise the night will get better. I want to play a game with all y'all called Truth and Dare. And I promise if you play, my old cheerleading friends will show themselves and we can all hang out.
The guys cheered and clunked their beers together.
To shake things up, she continued, I want to play a version where we go around in the circle and each person gives either a truth or dare to the group as a whole. I'll go first. I dare all of you to try a bit of my favorite dish from Mexico.
Now, not wanting to look stupid, I made sure to grab one of her weird flower-looking dishes for myself and ate it in front of everyone. It kind of tastes like honey. Y'all should just eat it. Don't be assholes and ruin this for Amy, I said. And I swear Amy winked at me when I said that, making me feel a whole lot better. After everyone tried it, we went around the circle, all doing whatever weird truth or dare the guys wanted everyone to do. It was real funny to watch all of them hopping around and doing whatever other shit came to mind. The guy next to me decided to make people do a truth. We each had to tell a real-life horror story. All of the stories were real stupid, and half of them sounded real made up, except for Amy's. That girl was really something. Apparently, there was some guy that her and 3 of her friends were real close to in college. He wasn't exactly her normal type, and he always played some band instrument around them, but she felt somehow bound to him. The 4 girls all dated this guy at the same time, and they were all okay with it. One day, she felt suddenly really weird about the whole situation and tried to run away from the guy. But the guy stalked her and knew exactly where she was. The freak told her that she belonged to him until 20 days were up and that she had no choice. Amy kept seeing this guy everywhere that she went, and regardless of what she said to the other 3 girls, they all told her it was her duty to be with this guy, or something real stupid like that. She went to some party and ran into him, and the next thing the girls knew, they were all tied up in the middle of the woods. The girls got themselves free and began trying to piece together what happened the night before, but ain't none of them knew nothing. They start wandering around trying to figure their way back to Auburn when one of them finds the instrument the guy had always played at the top of a cliff. They start freaking out, realizing the guy was probably the one behind tying them up, and they start running down the hill. That's when they end up finding the guy, all bent out of shape at the bottom and breathless. To this day, she still doesn't know what happened to them that night. After Amy told that story, and the last people had their turn of telling people either truths or dares to do, Amy told us that it's now time to go outside. Much to our delight, we can see and hear a whole bunch of girls all talking amongst themselves and dancing around in a circle a distance away. Once outside, Amy stripped off her clothes and told us if we wanted to talk to the girls, we had to do the same. Us, being buzzed and staring at this hot chick before us, did what we were told. All of the girls were naked, and we were all pretty happy to go and join them by the fire. It took us a while to notice that our friend Alex was tied up on a concrete slab. She thanked us for being there tonight in honor of some weird demon from Mexico or some shit that I can't remember the name of. Next thing we know, Amy had stabbed Alex in the stomach, ripped out his heart, and held it, still beating, up high in the air. All the girls cheered as they picked up Alex's body and threw him into the fire. And I swear, officer, that's what happened. It was those girls.
Recently retired, Abigail was delighted that she no longer had any reason to speak to anyone. She had a pet cat named Isabel, and Isabel offered all of the companionship that Abigail felt like she would need. Abigail preferred reading to Cable, and she would spend most of her days curled up under a blanket on her favorite couch that overlooked the sea with a cup of cocoa in hand. Isabel snuggled against her, and with minimal to no distractions. One day, she went out to check the mail and noticed a rather fanciful letter tucked in amongst the spam. How bizarre, she thought to herself. Who could possibly be writing to me? With her letter opener, she carefully slit the envelope and pulled out its contents. It was an invitation for her to meet at an attorney's office to discuss the will of her uncle, Robert Wynor. Uncle Robert's death was a surprise to her, and him leaving her anything in his will was that much more of a surprise. He, like her, and like many others in their family, were loners. Being a member of the Wynor family was seen as a curse by some, as many of the members were shunned by society. Uncle Robert, like Abigail, would likely have argued that he shunned society instead of the other way around. The next day, Abigail went to the office of the attorney, and her suspicions of what she had been made to inherit were made true. To her, through Robert's death, she had been gifted the Wynor Manor. The Wynor Manor had been in the family for many generations, and becoming the new proprietor was an honor amongst the family. Although she adored her home with its simplicity, the estate was desolate, cold, and removed from society, and that felt like a better fit for her. The estate had a reputation for being haunted, but Abigail wasn't worried. She actually preferred it that way. If the locals had a natural tendency to avoid the manor, then that would only make the home that much more appealing for her needs. There would be no visitors, and the people of the town would avoid her that much more due to her association with the estate. So she packed up her stuff, put Isabel into a carrier, and moved in to the manor, feeling only slightly remorseful to leave her previous home behind. When she opened the doors to the manor, a cold draft greeted her, along with a damp, repugnant odor. She hauled her suitcase to the old bedroom that she had stayed in a few times as a child and began to unpack as Isabel walked around, mewing and trying to make sense of her new surroundings. She knew that she would have a lot of work to do in the morning, but her excitement over her new home made it difficult for her to rest. The wind howled, the grandfather clock ticked on, and she could hear the sound of the doors opening and closing from the natural draft in the house. Come on, Brain. Don't get so excited. You can explore the house in the morning. The movers will be here tomorrow, and you have to get some sleep before. Eventually, a restless sleep overtook her, and not long after, her alarm rang, and it was time to get up. The coffee in the house was old and dry, which was exactly what she preferred. Although it did not offer her a caffeine boost, she felt like she was at home. When the movers finally left, she felt relief. This home was finally hers, and no living being would ever enter into her home again. She wandered the property until she came across the family graveyard. She traced her fingers on the inscriptions and felt a strong connection with those that had lived in the estate before her. She felt that much more confident that she would be able to serve the family well as she lived out the rest of her days here. The day quickly turned to evening, and she walked back to the manor. While unpacking more of her stuff, she began to hear chatter and music coming from down the hall. She walked towards it. Although she would have typically been worried, there was something so familiar about the sound that she found herself more curious instead. When she opened the doors to the dining hall, she found the ghostly spirits of her late ancestors floating and chatting around the room. Anyone else might have felt frightened, but Abigail understood what it meant at once. Being the proprietor of the estate meant that she was also the curator for the dead. If anyone could understand a Wynor ghost and their needs, it would be a Wynor themselves. The memory of my son standing in front of my husband sat vividly in my head this morning. When the police came to investigate his death, there had been no indicator that any one person was responsible for the incident. They said that it was a heart attack, and I tried to believe them. And even though it worked for a while, each time that I reflect back to that scene, the same suspicion of my son's involvement haunts me. Andrew had always been a troubled boy. Even with all of the love and understanding that I had for him as a mother, I could only defend the strangeness in his actions to a certain extent. Each time that I got called to a parent-teacher conference, I was always worried, if not even a little bit hopeful, that someone would see the same side of him that I saw, and that they would recommend for him to see a school psychiatrist or at least some other type of specialist. That way, when I told him, the news wouldn't be coming from me. But no, all of his teachers said that he was a bright student that participated well in class, and that he had several friends that he associated with on a normal basis. And they all even said that Andrew was perfectly normal in every single way. Even going so far as to mention that they wished even more kids could be like him because he was an ideal student, mentioning that I should be so proud as a mother, which I suppose was fine, I guess. It's not as if Andrew did anything outright that raised my suspicions. For the life of me, I could not pinpoint why my own son made me feel so nervous, and yet he did. Andrew had always been polite towards his stepfather, but he never really went out of his way to bond with him. I didn't take it as an offense, nor did Harry at first, but after a year passed, I couldn't help but begin getting angry over it. Didn't I have a right to be happy and for my son to accept that Harry made me happy? My other friends who had remarried, either after a divorce or their husbands' deaths, told me that Harry's response was only natural. They told me that Andrew's indifference would be much more preferable to them than their own children's reaction of hating the new man in their life. I agreed with them to an extent, but still, I could not help feeling hurt. During the months preceding my husband's death, Andrew's attitude towards Harry seemed to shift, and initially I was delighted. The two of them began spending a lot of time together, and Harry would always compliment me on raising such an inquisitive, intelligent boy. The two seemed to bond over everything, and they even began working with each other on woodworking projects and creating unique culinary recipes in the kitchen. I had never seen Andrew take such an interest in anything of the sorts before, and I should have been happy because of it. But the whole act made me feel more tense than I had before. I wondered a lot during that time if I had somehow grown envious that the two men in my life were becoming close. But that notion seemed ridiculous when stated out loud to my friends. Again, my friends assured me that I should be delighted that the two were getting along, especially since that was all that I had wanted and had been complaining to them about. And of course, I knew that they were right. The two getting along had been what I wanted, but something about the situation just didn't feel quite right. I started going mad with the thought that part of me might hate my own son. There was just something about him that seemed to unnerve me to my very core. I began doubting that I was feeling jealousy, but instead a hatred for ever getting married to Harry and putting him in harm's way. The thought was not grounded in anything concrete, yet when I tried to shake it from my thoughts, it seemed to plant itself further into my brain. Could there really be a part of me that hated my own son? I started seeing a psychologist who told me that my perceived issue with my son was likely in connection with my own feelings of guilt and sense of feeling wronged by Andrew's dad. The issue with trauma therapy, however, is that it gets worse before it gets better. Each time that I saw Andrew, I could feel my sense of unease around him growing stronger. I began yelling at him and pushing him harder than before. He was a good kid, and I hated myself after, but I just could not shake that feeling that Andrew was somehow disturbed. I tried to believe that Andrew had not killed Harry when I saw him staring at his body sprawled out on the kitchen floor. Anyone would have been in shock if they had found a body. It's not weird that he was hovering, especially considering how close the two of them had become over the past few months. Andrew became very quiet, quieter than usual, after Harry's death, and he refused to really speak at all. He wasn't rude, and it was hard to find a concrete reason to suspect him of anything. Yet, I could still not shake the thought that Harry's death had been purposeful, and that it was my brilliant, kind, charismatic kid's fault. 1 week passed like this, and I felt as if I was truly going mad. Andrew was still a minor, and he was still lived at home. I knew that I needed to support him, but all I could see when I looked at him was a murderer. and as the person who had taken my Harry away from me. One day, flies, hundreds of them, began to swarm all at once in the house, breaking the otherwise calm and quiet afternoon. I couldn't help but to view this as a biblical plague, warning me of some great evil lurking in the house. I held my breath and tried to clear my head of its anxieties, but the swarming only made it worse. I tried to call out for Andrew to help me get rid of the flies, but he did not respond. I searched frantically for a fly swatter as more and more flies continued to swarm around me. The whole room seemed to be going black around me as I listened to the incessant buzzing of the flies. Where had they even come from? We had just had an inspection 3 weeks ago. I spent most of the afternoon trying to kill the flies alone without much reprieve. When I opened the door to Andrew's room to yell at him for not helping me, I could see that there was a giant swarm huddled around a mass in the center of the room. I went over towards it and found Andrew's body being picked over by flies. It was hard to tell through the sea of black, but it looked as if he had been stabbed many times over. I cried as I desperately tried to fight the grisly swarm, and eventually was able to find my way to my boy. My precious, sweet, charismatic, intelligent boy who still had my fabric scissors sticking out from his neck. Although she had been prescribed medication to help with her vivid hallucinations, she found that the side effects were more unpleasant and that she missed that part of her. Her hallucinations were so much a part of her that the sudden absence made her feel as if she was no longer herself. The psychiatrist assured her that this feeling was normal and that eventually she would recognize her new frame of mind as her true self, but Cassie doubted that this was true. In fact, she hadn't even wanted to go to a psychiatrist initially. She had warmed up to the idea after a few sessions, and although it was nice to have someone talk to her about her visions, she found it frustrating that everyone seemed to think that she needed to go. She did not blame her dad for encouraging her to go and see someone. If she was a mother and had a daughter that had been a victim of a stalker, wouldn't she also want to make sure that she got the help that she needed? Perhaps if this decision had not been forced on her, then she wouldn't feel so conflicted. However, for now, the constant reminders and encouragement over her progress made her more angry than thankful. No one understood what she had been through, and she was tired of being controlled and feeling like a symptom that needed to be cured as opposed to just a person. Everyone seemed so fixated on the fact that she needed to be cured. The only time that she took her medicine was when the true nightmares began to form. When it felt as if a hand was slowly reaching towards her, if she could feel his breath upon her skin, or even see him in front of her, bloody with his body massacred. It had been a year since the incident with Charles. The circumstances that led to his death played like a loop in her head, tormenting her and telling her that it was all her fault. The only way to stop the constant racket was for her to pop 3 times the prescription amount along with a bit of liquid courage. She had been getting better, but after meeting Bren, the memories and the reminders had started getting worse. She wanted to blame the prescription, but she knew that it was not the real cause. There was just something about Bren that made her feel uneasy, even though she viewed him as a friend.
You should be dead.
She heard Bren say. I know, she whimpered.
You're possessed. You're a demon, and no one could ever care for you.
I know,
I hope he kills you for me.
said Bren, as his image dissipated into nothingness. She cried out to the image of Bren, telling it that it wasn't real. Bren wasn't Charles, and she needed to remember that. She felt frightened. She lived alone, and the house seemed too ominously empty. Although the image was gone, she could not shake the sensation that it would be too easy for Bren to enter her house and to stay lurking in the shadows, just as Charles had done. She pulled her knees to her chest and scanned the dark room, but no one was there. Her cell phone began to ring, and she welcomed the distraction. "Oh, hey, August," she smiled.
Hey, Cass. I just wanted to call and make sure that you made it home safe.
"Yeah, I sure did. Bren walked me home."
You sound nervous. Have you been taking your pills?
"Yeah, I took it about an hour ago."
Is he there still?
No, he didn't come in. He kind of just stood back and made sure that I was able to get in.
He didn't walk you through your door?
He asked, concerned. "No, I asked him not to, but he insisted on staying close until I was inside."
I don't trust him, Cass. Please tell me that you locked your doors.
I think I did. But I'm not sure. I'll go check." She got out of the bed and walked towards the front door. The deadbolt was in place, but she did not feel at ease. She opened the blinds and peeked outside. Bren was gone, and she sighed, a breath of relief. She put a pot on the stove and began making herself some chamomile. The hairs on the back of her neck began to stand on end. She went to double check the door, but it was still locked. "You're okay," she reminded herself. "Although you live alone, you are perfectly safe. August is just a phone call away. You are safe. There is nothing to worry about. Charles is dead, and Bren is a friend." A robust laugh broke the silence. Without thinking, she grabbed the steaming kettle and threw it in the direction of the laughter. Hot water scorched her feet, but at least the laughter had subsided. "I didn't need tea, after all," she said as she popped another pill. No space had ever felt safe. Past memories often tore through her conscious state, leaving her in a constant state of fear, reminding her that she was vulnerable and never truly safe. Once again, the hairs on her neck stood on their end. "Just show yourself! I know you're here!" she yelled into the black oblivion of her home. Silence greeted her in return, Her paranoia was in full swing, and she knew that something was off. She walked to check her back door and noticed that it was wide open. She tried to close the door, but the locks had been taken off completely. She picked up her phone, ready to call the police, but paused at a text message from August.
Hey, Cass, I'm worried about you. Let me know when you're going to sleep, please. You didn't sound okay on the phone earlier.
She should have called the police, but instead, she called him. August, hey, can you come over? I'm scared. My back door has been forced open and I don't know what to do. She headed back to the kitchen to grab a knife. As she walked, she could hear the back door violently shaking behind her. The roaring tempest outside had knocked out the power, and she could feel her anxiety getting worse. She used the flashlight on the phone as she slowly creeped towards the kitchen. Shadows dashed across the mirror as the robust laughter from earlier echoed down the hall. She turned the corner into the living room and she found Bryn sitting on her couch.
Hey, Cassie, were you looking for a knife?
He asked as he gently stroked the blade of one in his hands. His aura was crimson. She had never seen that color before. Slowly, his head turned to the side while his teeth flashed a knowing grin.
I heard you scream, Cassie. It's not good for a young woman, especially one that looks like you, to be alone.
A new voice interrupted his dialogue.
Cass! Cass! Let me in, Cass!
She ran to the back door, ignoring Bren in order to open it. But the door, that had just been opened a few minutes ago, was stuck closed. Come to the front! I'll unlock it! When she ran back to the living room, Bren was gone. She yanked the door open and let August into the house.
Cass, are you okay? Have you called the police? Why are you in the dark? Let's get some lights on, okay?
They won't turn on.
Where's your breaker box? I'll go check it.
I really don't know, she stammered. She followed him as he searched the house, but they had no luck.
It's probably outside. Do you mind if I go out the back door and look? It doesn't seem like anyone's here.
You can, but it's broken, remember?
Everything seemed fine to me. I didn't see the broken lock from the outside like you said it would be, but I'll look at it again.
They approached the door and saw that it had been sealed closed.
Cass, do you ever use this door?
He asked.
It looks like it's stuck in its casing. There's no way that this door could open.
What? She asked, confused. Hadn't she just seen that the lock had been tampered with an hour ago? Yeah, I forgot. I had someone do that when I first moved in, as a safety measure. I sort of forgot.
It's okay. You're crazy, you know? If you wanted me to come over and stay the night, you could have just asked. I've been hinting that I liked you all summer. You didn't have to come up with some elaborate ploy.
The breaker was outside, and August was able to turn the lights back on to the house. He searched one last time and came back to where she had been sitting in the living room.
No one's here. The only abnormality was that your bathroom window was open, but that was likely a result of the storm. It knocked over a vase, and there's water all over the floor. I cleaned it up and made sure that the window was properly latched so that it won't happen again. Let's go ahead and get into bed, okay?
As they lay in bed, she wrapped her arms tightly against his exposed chest. For once, she felt safe. She felt it within his embrace. She knew that he would protect her. The next morning, she woke up and saw that she had several new messages and missed calls from Bren asking her why she never responded. He said that he was worried about her and that he wasn't sure if he could come over. She sent a quick text back explaining that August had come over and that she was sorry that she had made him worried, but that she was okay.
That's not really an excuse, Cassie.
He responded. I'm sorry, okay? I forgot. Don't be so mad at me, Bren.
I'm coming over. We need to talk.
Can we talk later? August is still here. I don't want to bother him.
I'm already here, Cassie. Let me in.
She walked to the living room and once again found him sitting on her couch.
I never left yesterday. I've been worried about you. I walked in through the back door after hearing you scream. I grabbed this knife to protect you. You shouldn't be alone. Come sit next to me.
She sat down.
Can I hold you?
He asked her. Bren, this is really weird. Plus, I'm here with August.
No one is here, Cassie. It's only ever been the two of us.
I'm gonna go check on him. As she walked back into the room, all she could see was an empty bed. Had their night together really only been a dream? She turned back to face the entrance of the room. Bran was standing there watching her, as if she was some misfortunate creature to be pitied.
Cassie, I have something to tell you.
Okay, she sighed, motioning for him to come sit on the bed and feeling nervous about whatever it was that he could possibly say to her.
Are you sure?
He asked in excitement. It's just a place to sit. You seem like you have something serious to say, and I'd rather be at eye level.
Okay. Look, I really don't know how to say this, but I don't think that you should live alone anymore. I would like to move in.
I've lived alone for years, she said, taken aback.
Cassie, you have a problem, and I'm really concerned for you. Someone needs to be here to protect you from intruders, and more importantly, from yourself. When I spend the night on your couch, I often find you in a trance-like state, walking around the house and murmuring to yourself. Your eyes are wide open, and you appear to be awake, but when I try to shake you
She
out of
took
it,
another
you
pill
never
as he
respond
continued
and
to
continue
speak.
doing what you're doing. You mumble about how people are coming to get you. When you do look in my direction and acknowledge me, you say that you know that August wants to kill you, and that it's only a matter of time. I like you, Cassie. I want you to live with me. I want to protect you, to be with you, and to keep you safe. I don't like August coming over. I don't trust him, and you clearly don't trust him either. I hate that he lives so close to you.
Bren, she hesitated. I thought that I made it obvious that I like August.
I know what you've said, but he doesn't like you, Cassie. He's only using you. We talked last night while you were sleeping, and he said that if you two did get together, that he would only be in it for the sex.
She glared at him. She wasn't sure what to believe, but at that moment, she needed him away from her, and she told him so. Instead of leaving, he came closer to her with his arms outstretched. She felt claustrophobic as memories of Charles began to swim to the surface of her active consciousness. She shoved him away from her. Get off of me!
Are you going to kill me if I touch you? You killed Charles, but you won't be able to kill me, Cassie. I'll protect you from yourself. Demon be gone. Leave her body alone. She won't be killing anyone else.
His aura was crimson. She woke up, sweating feverishly.
Cass, babe. Cass, please, I'm here.
August whispered as he pulled her close to him.
It was only a nightmare. Have some of your medicine and go to sleep.
August handed her her pill bottle, and she took one of her pills, noticing uneasily that the contents were growing thin. August kissed her on her forehead and pulled her back into his arms. She listened to August as he fell back asleep. Although she had taken a pill, she could not help but to still feel shaken by her dream. Normally, she would check the corners of her house before drifting back to sleep. This action calmed her down, but tonight her eyes found Bren with his crimson aura holding her knife in the corner of her room. His head was cocked to the side, and he had a large grin upon his face. She ran back to the bed and held tightly onto August until sleep finally took her over. August and Cassie began dating after that night, and she decided to not tell August the source of her nightmare. When he asked, she feigned ignorance and said that she couldn't remember. She still saw Bryn in the corners of her house, and although she knew that it was all a hallucination, she still found it increasingly difficult to talk to Bryn. It wasn't fair to her to dismiss Bryn. It wasn't as if he had actually done anything, and he also wasn't the only one that she saw. She also often saw Charles lying bloody in her bed and her younger self staring at the body of her attacker before disappearing behind a mirror. Compared to Charles, Bren was significantly less disturbing. August could tell that she was bothered by her strained relationship with Bren.
I'm going to be gone for a week for my work conference. While I'm gone, it might be good for you to mend your relationship with him. I think me being gone might make it easier for you both.
She made plans to go out for drinks with Bren a few days later. His aura was blue, and he picked her up from her house.
Hey, Cassie. I'm sorry, but I forgot my wallet at the apartment and need to go back.
He insisted that she come inside as he opened the door and let her walk in first. He grabbed his wallet and made for the door before stopping in front of it.
Cassie, I have to tell you something. I want you to live with me. I want to keep you safe. I don't trust August, and I hate that he lives so close to you. I took the liberty of gathering clothes your size, your favorite beauty products, and anything else that you might need.
Bren, I don't want that. I like August. I'm dating August.
Cassie, he's a stalker. He sneaks into your house through your bathroom window, and he lurks inside.
Excuse me?
He's a stalker.
What I want to know is why you're saying that. And because you knowing my clothing size and what makeup I wear almost makes you sound like a stalker.
Cassie, I've loved you since I first met you.
You've never been invited inside of my house. How do you know I have a window in my bathroom?
Cassie, you aren't listening. I see him go into your house every night.
Yeah, Bryn, we're dating.
He doesn't like you. I can tell. I stay hidden in your corners and have watched him. I will protect you from him. He's only using you.
You broke into my house?
We had a conversation. He said that he's only using you for the sex, and that he's planning on breaking up with you. I, on the other hand, have loved you for weeks.
I've only known you for a month.
You'll be safe with me. I won't use you. I will actually love you.
She ran to the bathroom and locked the door, determined to call the police. This can't be another Charles intrusion. It can't. The vents were loud, and she thought that she would be safe. But in the bathtub, she found something that disturbed her. There was blood all over it and on the bathroom floor. A message was there for her to read, smeared in blood on the wall. Cass, get. Whatever else it said was completely illegible, as it made lines down the wall as if whoever was writing it fell and lost their balance while writing. Cassie crashed to the ground, trembling as the bathroom door handle began to move. She could not find the voice to scream, not that she thought that it would have mattered. She could sense her own blood draining from her face as her whole body trembled violently. Why is this happening? What is happening? She thought out loud. She grabbed her pill bottle, but it was empty. How long had it been since she had taken her medicine last? She tried to remember, but the blood on the floor was swirling sickeningly around her. Bryn opened the door. His aura was a deep crimson.
It's a lot of blood, isn't it? I hadn't expected it, but he was good practice. If you refuse to love me, then I will kill you. How could you date him, Cass? You knew that I loved you.
She closed her eyes and wished for it to all go away. She found her voice and finally let out a scream.
No one can hear you, Cassandra. Finally, the demons that possess you will be dead. I am your remedy. She never stopped screaming through the whole ordeal. I don't think she saw me kill Bryn, and I'm honestly glad that she didn't. The last thing that Cassie needed was any more images of death floating around in that brain of hers. I'm just glad that she seems okay.
Do you have any comments on the roofies found in Bryn's apartment? The officer asked.
I thought he was creepy, but I didn't have a full grasp of the reality of the situation at the time. If I would have known that he had been drugging her, then I would have warned her not to see him.
How about her LSD usage?
No comment.
How did you end up at Bryn's that night?
I sort of staged the event. Bryn recognizes faces extremely well, and he had remembered Cassandra's from the news story surrounding her killing her past abuser. I always found him to be creepy, and I warned him not to pursue her. He never listened, and so I knew that I would have to make my relationship with her be something known to him. I broke the back door that she had someone weld closed and then killed the lights at her house. Bryn knew that Cassie was prone to panic attacks at night time and to stay nearby until she told him that she was okay. After he dropped her off, I told Cassie not to trust Bryn and to lock her doors. After killing the lights, I let out my best evil laugh to make it known to her that someone was in the house. Bryn heard her scream and tried to call her, but she didn't answer. As I had hoped, she thought that her paranoia was setting in, and that's when she called me, and I came over to save the day. Bryn caught on and tried to warn her about me, but she shoved him away. I slipped into her bed once she had fallen asleep, and I let her know that it was all a nightmare. Bryn caught on and went into Prince Saves the Princess mode. He called me to talk about his feelings for her, and he didn't respond well to the idea of us dating.
Catalina Ballo was well known as a gymnast. Although she was particularly skilled in her craft, it was her reputation that she was known for most of all. Catalina was a bit arrogant in addition to being a show off. She could not be bothered to talk to anyone that she viewed to be lesser than her, and her teammates were not off limits to this behavior. Ultimately, if she were not as fantastic of an all around gymnast, then she would likely never find a sponsor and would be dropped completely. However, unfortunately, for those in the gymnastics circle, her presence made the team success that much more likely. If a team failed, it was never because of Catalina Barro. She practiced harder than anyone else. She was principled in her craft, waking at the same time, practicing for the same amount of time, taking ice baths, eating a well balanced diet, and never drinking. She looked down on those that refused to act like her, and she would scoff at them. Catalina would remind them all that the only way to be successful in life was to be more like her. And again, unfortunately, she had the backing to prove it. No one was as disciplined as Catalina Palo, and because of this, no one could question her theory that success came from her specific discipline. All mornings were the same for Catalina. She would arrive at the gymnasium at 4:30 a.m. and would begin her meditation practice. She always listened to the same guided meditation that was given to her by her late coach, and she would listen to it for 30 minutes, stretch in exactly the same way after as she had done all the days before, and would then begin her rotation of beam, then floor, then vault, and then lastly bar. Her teammates would arrive for practice, and they knew her routine. They would laugh and joke amongst one another, but none of them would dare get in Catalina's way. When the day was over and Catalina felt satisfied with her performance, she would go home and decompress. Each day was always the same protein rich meal provided to her by her personal chef with the same ingredients as the night before, and the night before that, and the years before that. Catalina's only focus in her life was gymnastics. Her house was scarce, with barely anything in it at all. She had a maid for cleaning, a chef for meals, and for the rest of the time, she was alone, and she preferred it that way. A competition was coming up in just 3 weeks, and she could not afford any distractions for herself. With it being 3 weeks out from the competition, Catalina was more prone to her angry outbursts. Each day, she would make a snide remark to her teammates about how their refusal to follow her routine was in bad taste, and that they were only screwing themselves out of better scores and a chance at joining the Olympics team. One morning, her teammates surprised her and actually arrived at her normal time. Catalina was initially happy by this, but her mood soon turned sour. Her routine was very strict, and these girls, instead of meditating with her and understanding the seriousness of her practice, only complained about how early it was and how they wished that they could have slept in a little bit longer, not understanding why they had to arrive at 4:30 a.m. One of them even had the audacity to say that she would have preferred the option to arrive later and forgo the meditation practice altogether, as she found it to be stupid and not worth missing out on her sleepover. She swore that the next day she would take back the 30 minutes for herself instead of listening to some strange man drone on in a monotone. Several of the girls nodded their heads at this girl's opinion, but Catalina was not amused. The guided meditation was what she viewed as the most important practice that she could do in a day. If she did not listen to the meditation, then she strongly felt as if her whole day would be ruined and that there was no point in her even practicing without it. She chewed out the girls for their incessant ignorance on what it took to be a proper gymnast. And she even went so far as to tell them that she would purposely make the team lose if they were to ever disrespect her in her practices like that again. This particular meditation was special to her. She was given it 16 years ago by her first ever coach. She was reaching retirement age now at age 21, and that tape that she was given when she was 5, she listened to it every single day for that many years. Her coach had seen the potential in her, and he had told her that this meditation would make her successful, and she believed that full heartedly because she listened to it consistently every day and because she had not failed yet. No part of her doubted that what he said on that day had been true. There was a certain magic bound to this tape, and it was her main source of success. She tried to focus on the meditation that morning, but all she could hear was the snickering of the other girls under their breath. She knew the meditation forwards and backwards, but the girls were pissing her off too much for her to concentrate. How dare they disrespect her and her practice when none of them were even remotely as good as her? The zen was gone because of them. She stretched in silence as the girls tried their best to follow along, knowing that she was angry and not daring to say anything else to set Catalina off. As much as they hated being around her, they also knew that they needed to keep her happy if the team were to have the best chance of success. They nervously watched her as she got on the beam to practice her routine. They had seen her perform it many times over successfully, and she was more breathtaking to watch in person than she even was on the television. However, much to everyone's surprise, something was off with her today. They could tell that she wasn't the same Catalina that she normally was at practice. She was wobbly on her first cartwheel, and her full turn after almost sent her off of the beam. The team watched with bated breath as she steadied herself for her back handspring. She landed, but her foot was too wobbly, and even though all of them saw what was happening, none of them were quick enough to catch her as she landed on the ground and yelled in an agonized scream. The coach ran over to her, and Catalina, feeling broken, let out a fierce, primal growl. She was escorted out of the room as her teammates stared at her. She stared back with cold, dark eyes and said something to them that almost sounded like a curse about how they had made her miss the meditation tape and how they would pay for it. The coach called each of the girls individually later that afternoon to give an update on Catalina. She had broken her coccyx, her wrist, and her talus, and was unlikely to recover before the competition. I know that you girls don't like her, their coach said before continuing, but she seemed very insistent that you should all follow her guidelines to make it up to her for this. As most of you know, this was going to be her last year of gymnastics before retiring. And I think that, as arrogant as she is, that she has a right to be prideful in her routine. Reluctantly, the girls all showed up at practice the next morning at 4:30 a.m. to begin Catalina's routine at her request. What they had not expected was that Catalina would be there as well to monitor and watch them do what she had told them to do. They all felt uncomfortable, but there was something so terrifying about Catalina that no one dared to speak up out of fear of what she would do. Satisfied, Catalina pressed the start button on her cassette player and watched the girls as her old coach began to speak. She could tell that they weren't connecting with the message the same way that she did, and that some of them even seemed uncomfortable, but she didn't care. These girls had made it so she couldn't listen to her tape yesterday, and she knew that her not listening to the tape was why she fell. These girls were directly the cause of her injury, and she was going to make them feel pain the same way that she did. On day 4, girls' attitude towards the tape and the meditation seemed to change. They had the same look in their eye that Catalina always had, and they seemed to have her same determination. They won their competition by an unprecedented amount and qualified for the Olympics, or at least most of them did. There's just one problem. The girls without the tape suddenly felt as if they couldn't perform any longer. They felt as if without the tape that there was no reason for them to continue. They were becoming obsessed with it, and Catalina had the only copy. Without that tape, all the girls were truly ambitionless, like zombies. They began calling Catalina's phone and demanding the tape from her, and they refused to accept the answer of no, telling her that she was being selfish for holding on to it when she no longer needed it because she was retired. Catalina knew what she had been doing, and she was not worried about the threats from these girls. She could tell that she was being followed, but that didn't matter to her. Unfortunately, for the people in her life, the threats having absolutely no effect on her ended up influencing them as well. One day when Catalina got home, she went into her fridge for her normal meal and instead found the head of her personal chef with a note inside of her open mouth. Catalina pulled the note out and read it. It said that she would be next. Catalina scoffed and threw the note away. She was annoyed, not because her chef had been killed. In fact, the head being put in the fridge actually made her life a lot easier. There would be no bugs for her to deal with for a little bit, and it was pretty easy cleanup for her. Locked the doors to her house, made sure that nobody was there, and submerged herself in the bath. An ordinary person would feel uneasy about the sight, but Catalina was just happy that her plan was working. She knew the power of that tape, and she knew the effect that it would have on the other girls. That tape was a spell gifted to her by her father. The only thing that Catalina had wanted when she was a child was to do gymnastics and to do it better than anybody else. So she had him work out a spell for her that she would listen to every day. And so long as she listened to the spell, then she was unstoppable. The girls didn't know that, and Catalina wondered just how far they would go to try to obtain their own copy. Catalina thought about destroying the tape, but that didn't seem as fun for her. She was retired now. The injuries had assured that, and she needed something else to occupy her time. She could tell that there were break-in attempts. And the night that she came home and submerged herself in the bath, she knew that she wasn't alone. She heard the clumsy footsteps of her intruder, closed her eyes, and submerged into the bath, and felt the hands being pushed on her body as it tried to drown her. After a while, the girl gave up, and Catalina came out of the tub, laughing. "You're never gonna kill me like that. Plus, how do you expect to find the tape if I'm dead?" The girl didn't seem to know what to do. She yelled at Catalina. She told her that Catalina had ruined her life. And, with a smile, Catalina just said, "Not yet." She left notes for the girls, all the ones that were previously on her team, and then to meet her at their old gymnasium. And they all agreed. The next morning, they all showed up at the gymnasium to hear what Catalina had to say. "All of you want this tape, and I could give it to those of you who still practice together. But eventually, you're going to go your separate ways again. And the only way that this tape works is if you listen to it every day. Eventually, you will be separated. If you want to be as great as me, you have to take on ownership of this tape. The last girl standing will be the new owner. Good luck, and let the games begin." With glee, she watched the mortals as they began to attack each other. None of them had brought weapons. It was all brute force that they used to try to kill one another. The last girl came up to her, feeling victory in her grasp, and Catalina just smiled at her as she extended her talons and killed her there on the spot, thinking it a rather fun game as an immortal to have watched all of the mortals kill one another under such a simple spell that none of them even would have been able to control.